All right. We'll have the test starting Monday at 12:01 in the morning and ending Tuesday at 11:59 at night. It will cover everything up until this chapter. The position paper number 2 will be on autonomous vehicles, and that will be due April 7th. You will notice that it's already open and available for you. If you already have it, you can drop it in. All right, so leaving off a little bit of where we were last time, or let's just say the discussion that I had when I was talking about online about international markets. So we left off on those videos talking about piggybacking, and I'll go over that again very briefly. So what is piggybacking? Piggybacking is when one company uses distribution channels of another in a very particular circumstance. So let me give you an idea. Pfizer is a maker of pharmaceuticals. Pfizer has a intensive distribution network all across the United States. Pfizer works specifically on pharmaceuticals, but does have room where if they had some kind of over-the-counter things to sell, that would be something reasonable to sell along with their pharmaceuticals. So let's say there's a corporation in India or Malaysia or somewhere like that that specializes in holistic medicines. And let's say, boy, we'd love to be able to come into the United States. We just don't have the time and money to be able to get into the channels of distribution in the US. So the way piggybacking works is you got to have a certain series of circumstances to come out right. First, you want to be able to have the two corporations. So if you want to use the distributor channel of another, one of the things is that you want the products to have similar customer bases. And so Pfizer, they sell pharmaceuticals. Medicine is their particular bailiwick. Holistic medicines is in the same group. You have a similar customer base. However, what you also don't have is that other bullet point where there's no conflicts of interest between the Holistic Medicine Corporation and Pfizer. And so it's those two things line up, and it's a good situation. Have the same customer base, they don't market to the same customers, sounds good. Usually what happens is the company whose distribution channel they're using usually receive commission or service fees. It also helps the corporations such as Pfizer to improve and increase their product lines. And because for the corporation that's trying to break in, it saves time and it saves money. It's a win-win situation. Piggybacking works. Piggybacking is excellent. Now, there's one other thing that's called reciprocal or reverse piggybacking. Reciprocal piggybacking is actually a more accurate term. And this is when two companies use each other's distribution channel. There is more than just one corporation that is in the loop. Both corporations use each other's services. So what would be a good example of this? So in 1992 to 94, Bandai came out and exploded in the United States with the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. Bandai had the licensing for those particular models and toys. Bandai, of course, knew that you've got to strike when the iron is hot. Of course, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers is going even now. But in its white hot beginning, you wanted to be able to make as much money as you could. So what Bandai did was Bandai got in touch with Mattel Corporation. And they said, boy, we really love to be able to use your channels in North and South America. Can we come to some sort of agreement? Mattel Corporation said, funny you should say that. We've been trying to break into the Far East, into Asia for the last 40 years now. Maybe we can come up with an agreement. So what happened was Bandai shared their channels across China, South Korea, Japan, Malaysia, and all of Asia and Australia. Mattel shared their channels between North and South America. It was a great solution, one that helped them both immeasurably. It fit what you needed to do. They had similar customer bases. There might be a little bit of a conflict of interest, but very, very little, because there was no Mighty Morphin Power Rangers that Mattel had anyway. So it worked out. It allowed both sides to sell their surplus channels. It was a win-win situation. Hooray, everything works. And so this is an example of what piggybacking is. We've talked about internationally how well we're doing. One of the channels that we have to think about are opportunities for retail to go international. The book basically states that you must go international. I think a better word would probably say you should go international, because there are good reasons why you should. One of the bigger reasons is that, quite simply, especially in the United States, there's very slow growth in our markets right now. And especially, this book was written in 2016 and 18. And of course, we've had substantial losses in the retail environment since then. We find that foreign markets can be much more attractive as well. It gives us to take in our established product base and be able to use or go into more efficient or brand new markets. It requires us to be able to be a little bit more clever, to be able to develop them particularly with those markets in mind. But the success is that you get into a virtuous cycle. It becomes a success cycle that feeds upon itself. So you expand, you're going overseas. You have the advantages of economies of scale. You're able to produce and be able to sell all of your goods at capacity, hopefully, all right? You're able to also have economies of scale when it comes to the marketing research, the financing, IT, advertising. The larger markets help you to develop and to grow those departments as well. You can find that products which may not have necessarily had a great life in the United States may do exceedingly well in other nations, just by the very nature of those particular countries. And you find that the very simple fact that you're expanding internationally creates or enhances the brand equity. You're no longer a national corporation, you're an international corporation. Give you an idea of how products across markets, when Polaroid came out with the SX70 land camera, which was an Instamatic camera, it did okay in the United States and it did fairly well. But in the United States, as we have now, especially, digital cameras are what are considered de facto standards. And of course, with phones, you have a camera now. Fuji was able to take the existing Polaroid model and create Instamatic film and cameras to take pictures that are business card sizes. And so this is an example of a product that can be exported across markets and actually has a greater market when it goes somewhere else. International retailing, it is almost a must in those firms that are big enough and strong enough to be able to expand. Now, it can also be said that because of the Omnichannel that the ability to grow across boundaries is greater than it's ever been. However, we still find that growth internationally in the retail environments are difficult. Why? Well, the first is, and it's a very basic one to think about, the need for high quality locations. For those of you who are not in real estate, the three most important things in real estate are location, location, and location. That is certainly true also in retail as well. It is not surprising or unusual, I'm sure in your own lifetime, to see places that have expanded and done well, that over a period of years, growth has stagnated in that area and corporations have had to move in order to survive. Well, just think of that in Europe, where civilizations have been built in cities that are hundreds of years older than ours are. Also, there's a need for comparable physical logistics besides the differences in infrastructure. In other words, just think about what we consider standards in terms of boxing and shipping and those kind of things in relationship to the rest of the world. We might be surprised to see that the trucks are not the same size. The railroads are certainly not the same size. There are many things that are different. And when we're thinking in physical sizes in the United States, they're dramatically different elsewhere. And then also realize you need for parallel suppliers or suppliers from home, you need to be able to ship as consistently as possible. Then think about having to adapt to differences in operations because of regulations. At one time in France, you had tariffs where they weren't necessarily tariffs that were financial penalties, but they're tariffs in terms of time. Goods would simply sit where they were on the docks until such time as they considered them acceptable to be released. Months is not unusual. And so that is the differences in terms of operations because of regulations. Also think about it this way, as I've talked about the Fuji camera, to have products that are attractive abroad. They may be outstanding and even excellent in the United States, but they don't resonate when they come here or when we go overseas with them. Some do dynamically and dramatically well, or even better. It is amazing. I mean, of course, the world loves a good cup of coffee, but I've been to a Starbucks in South Korea, and it is no different than the Starbucks that is the one out on Blowing Rock Road. They're very, very much the same model. And then realize that there are multiple barriers to entry, usually through finder's fees. Timing is also critical as well. You may have franchise fees and other things. In Mexico and in other countries, you cannot have corporations there unless the CEO or head of the corporation is a native of that country. That's not unusual. And so these are some of the barriers that retailers find when they're trying to expand. Not everything works well. This was a slide that just showed you some of the corporations that have tried to succeed and some that have failed. Walmart is one of those interesting things because they've done quite well in Central America, but there are very simple things that in a Walmart that did not translate well. You know, the United States has much different cuts of beef than we do, than is done in Central and South America. It's kind of interesting. When I was in South Korea, you don't find the standard cuts of chicken, and boy, do they love chicken. I mean, they really do, fried chicken especially. But the cuts that you will find are not the same. And so you'll find that US cuts in the way that we think of them are dramatically different and is not as desired as they would be overseas. It's also kind of an interesting thing when you talk about our taste versus tastes overseas. The United States, in terms of chicken, predominantly eat white meat by a factor of something like 5 to 1. The rest of the world eats dark meat by a factor of 5 to 1. Tyson Foods and all of the other chicken manufacturers in the United States actually do this. They take the white meat, they use that specifically for the American market, and they take the dark meat, excuse me, and transfer that to the rest of the world. No lie. And in that way, the good thing is that the goods are never wasted. Okay, so we just find that sometimes culturally there are not successes. You find it in the United States, however, European or Asian kinds of organizations and businesses do quite well here. Walmart did miserably in Europe, did good in China, did fair in Central America, and did very well in Mexico. It just depends on culturally how reasonably well that they work together. So retailing has its issues, but all of those other things. I should also say this, is that when you are an international retailer, you must get used to the fact that full service mom and pop stores can exist right next to you, be competitive with you, and just realize that you have to accept that they are in business and you and they stand next to each other. All right. What's the key? Being able to deliver some form of a unique benefit that is not seen in their traditional products. So that is retailing, and the difficulties that go in with being a retailer. Franchising, however, is an entirely different model. Franchising, by its very nature, in which you have one separate corporate franchisor and you have multiple feet on the ground franchisees, is a model for success when it comes to international expansion. So this is kind of a slide here. This was 2016. Russia had 9,000 franchises. Brazil's franchises in 2015 totaled $38 billion. There are challenges with international franchising, and certainly the biggest is the legal precedent, because franchises by their nature are unusual and unique in relationship to other countries. So you find that there's a lack of a legal precedent regarding them, and it leads sometimes difficulty to enforcing contracts, especially when it comes to enforcing deadlines and drop dead dates and those kind of things. But franchising works. So what are the different kinds of models for international franchises? And we have this over here. And let's see if I can zoom into that a little bit and make it a little bit easier for you to see. I'll try. All right, let's see. Oops, not good. Come on, Dave. Make this thing work. Okay. All right, I hope you can see that, but I'll explain each one, all right? So there are actually 4 kinds of franchises that we can come up with when it comes to international. The first is direct franchising. And this is where you recruit individual franchisees. So you have a corporate franchisor, okay? You have the corporate franchisor. They are looking for individual franchisees to be able to do the same things as those franchisees would do in the United States, okay? Direct franchising It's the same model. It's what you would consider to be the traditional model. Area development franchising is where one franchisee is given the ability to open multiple franchise outlets over a given area within a specific time frame. And so the franchisee would be given the right of, let's say if they were in Thailand, they would be in Bangkok, multiple locations. They'd be able to spend as much time there as they wish, as long as within the given time frame, they have developed the market to a sufficient size. And so that's area development franchise, all right? Multi-user franchising over a geographic area that they're giving exclusive rights to. Let me also say that. The last is what's known as master franchise, or not the last, because I've got joint venture, but the next model is master franchising. And this is a very unique idea. And it actually acts as like a three-tiered system, all right? And so how it works is you have the corporate franchisor, you have in the other country a franchisee, and then you actually have what are called sub-franchises. And so how does the model work? Okay, the franchisor, franchisee is exactly like direct franchising. So the franchisee acts as if it has a separate loss of identity. They are basically having their own outlets. They could have more than one outlet, who knows? But this franchisee has more ability than just basically being a representative, being that. The franchisee can be an agent for the franchisor. They can act on behalf of the franchisor and actually assign franchises and franchise locations to sub-franchisees. So in essence, they act as a franchisor in the nation in which they're working in. So let's use the Thailand example. So Pizza Hut in the United States as a franchisor goes to this franchisee in Bangkok and says, I want you to open a franchise. Not only that, but we trust you so much that we want you to do our job and go recruit franchisees. You have the right to give out those licenses. You have the right to assign territories. You have the right to go open one yourself if you want to. And so the franchisee of that geographic area recruits sub-franchisees. And as I said, they act as the middle person, the go-between agent. Why do master franchises work? Because that franchisee, the middle person, understands very intimately about what goes on in the geographic area that they're assigned. And so if someone is working out of Bangkok, they have an intimate understanding of what's going on in that geographic area. They know where expansion can occur and perhaps where it may not. They can assign sub-franchises. The question that was asked to me one time was, well, what about contracts? The contracts, I'm guessing, all come from corporate. So I don't know if the franchisee has the right to change contracts. I would seriously doubt it. But they can act as a liaison, a go-between, and they can probably do some negotiating, okay? The last is what's known as a joint venture, all right? So what is a joint venture? A joint venture would be a franchisor, just to give you an example, let's say it's Incheon Airport in South Korea. You have this franchisor, Starbucks, all right? You have a company that desires a Starbucks in that location, but they don't know anything in particular about running the franchise as it is, but they have locations that are desired. So let's say it's Incheon Airport. Starbucks and Incheon Airport come together to form a joint venture, usually in the creation of a third corporation, and that third corporation runs the coffee franchise that is set up in Incheon Airport. And of course, there's multiple outlets for Starbucks coffee. If you've never been in Incheon, okay? So this is an example of what joint venture direct franchising is that instead of a hierarchical in nature, what they do is they come together to create this third corporation, and that corporation is in essence the franchisee. Does it work? Yes, it works very well. You find that in nations that are similar to Western culture, that you find that the direct franchising model works quite well. That in essence, there is enough familiarity and similarity in the way that we conduct our business that the direct franchising works just fine. If we're plowing into new territory, one that we've never been in, and we also need someone who has an intimate understanding of how business is done in that area, then certainly you're going to see area development or master franchise. Area development would be if the franchisee is so powerful and strong that they don't necessarily need to be able to recruit such franchises. Master franchising is more likely if you need to have local interests, that there's more decentralized kinds of governments and economies, that master franchising would make more sense. If I were to go into countries such as Poland or Romania, corporations like that, that have a very eclectic culture, you might find that area development or master franchising may be a better route. You also might find that because of the particular nature of the governments, the way they're built, that a joint venture with a third corporation might be the best way to happen. It all depends on what is the more desirable way in which to conduct business. They all work, that's why they're up here, all right? It just depends on the circumstances to determine which one is better or not. So the whole section on wholesalers and the base of the pyramid, I don't think he did a very good job of explaining. And so what I hope for you to do is I want you to skip all over that. That's not going to be in the test. Contain your discipline. Okay. So the last section that we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about omnichannels and global marketing. We know this, especially internationally and overseas in emerging markets. By emerging markets, I mean those not with entrenched economies that have centuries of working together. I'm even talking about Eastern Europe, the nations that have been freed since the death of Soviet Russia. I mean, those would be examples of what I would consider to be emerging nations. You know, retailers thrive with the omnichannel. It gives them openings and avenues and venues that they never thought possible. They use the example here of India's D-Mart and Flipkart. I believe Walmart has bought Flipkart, if I'm not mistaken. Flipkart, by the way, is the Indian example of Amazon, all right? The wonderful thing about the omnichannels is that it allows retailers to penetrate markets without the need to be able to put down a brick and mortar store. It's really interesting because there's so many different ways that you can slice this apple. If you look at IKEA has no interest whatsoever of ever getting into the omnichannel. And for them, it's fine and they're doing quite well. For them to be able to look in their showrooms and use their products there, that's ultimately where they find success. You find that, as I've said before, in this model, the omni-channel helps emerging markets. It allows China and other nations to penetrate in places where they couldn't possibly. And of course, one of the things that it notes here is that China leads in mobile commerce. And it's not unusual. If you look down in the last bullet points about 5 reasons to be optimistic, the United States has approximately 340 million people in it. Well, there's 350 million people in China who use online food deliveries. So it just gives you an idea of the enormity of the nation, all right? So what are the reasons to be optimistic? Well, the first is that the adoption of smartphones, I find the adoption of smartphones is almost kind of, I don't know, anachronistic, because there is no adoption. It's just an entrenchment right now. You know, the entrenchment of smartphones in the young population, they are predictors of the adoption of new forms of shopping. And so what does that mean? It basically means that the omni-channel or the mobile phone is the vanguard or the leading indicator of the willingness and acceptance to find new ways that we can shop. I believe it's Warby Parker, the eyeglass company, that you can actually look at what your eyeglasses look on your face before you actually shop them. I thought that was very unique. Not that I buy them from them, but I just thought that was very unique. It's really, really catchy, all right? You also find that the individuals, the young population, such as yourself, often leapfrog to the newest innovations. And so you're not going to stay entrenched on whatever is the current number one. You're ready, willing, and able to move to the next thing. It's also kind of important right there. This doesn't go down in anything you're going to get tested on, but innovation is not invention, all right? Innovation is actually an anthropologic kind of definition. It also means not just a new invention, but it means new people, new plant, new equipment, new way of doing things. It means a fundamental change on the way that we're doing life as it is right now. And so when you say to the newest innovations, what you're saying is the willingness to profoundly change not just the inventions that we're using, but our ways of doing life, all right? You find also that as new innovations come on with the smartphone and e-commerce, it forces competitors to do the same. And so you have this virtuous, successful cycle of always working to come up with is the newest and latest thing. Traffic incentivizes traffic as well. So the more traffic you have, the greater the incentive to keep doing it. And so these are the reasons why the channels expand and international retailing is going to keep going on and on and on and on. Now, one of the things to realize is that e-commerce does not guarantee buyers, all right? When Jack, what's his name, for Twitter sold his very first tweet as a non-fungible token, he got $1.7 million for it or something outrageous like that. Just because you can do it doesn't mean that it's desired. Now, I think if you look in the NFT market right now, I think there's a certain amount of this that it's so new that it's generating itself. But eventually, what all e-commerce does, what all retailing does, is that it has to generate value. Otherwise, there will be no consumption, and ultimately, there will be no e-commerce. You will always have the difficulty of knockoffs and counterfeits, which are going to be difficult. But I would also say this, with Web 3.0 and cryptocurrencies, and with the advent of non-fungible tokens, I think we're approaching a new world on the web where you have the authentic, you have the true, and you have the sincere. And I think that is going to help e-commerce grow like it never has. And that's an amazing thing to say when you think about it. But I think personally, in terms of e-commerce and the omni-channel and retailing in general, I really feel that the best days are yet to come. All right, all driven mostly by the omni-channel movement itself. All right, we are finished. The test will start Monday morning at 12:01 a.m. It will finish at 11:59 on Tuesday night. We will be back in class on Thursday, the 7th. And that day also, we will have our position papers, the second one due on that day. We are wrapping it up, folks. We're coming down to the very end of this. So without further ado, have a great weekend. Stay out of the rain and enjoy yourselves. Take care. Bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you, Abby. Thank you, George.